Welcome to Signature Required. It is intended for Tennesseans by Tennesseans.
What makes them tick? What lights their fire?
We're pulling forward people that, unless you listen to this interview, you might not know a thing about them. The heart of a Tennessean, the volunteer state, is serve, and we do so largely without self-promotion.
And these are genuine people that get up every day and want to make art, or want to educate the nations, or want to have a heart of love in a way that makes a difference.
Learn from 50 years of experience, take a nugget away, and then go share it with a friend. Josh Burch, Director of People at the Honor Foundation. Welcome to Signature Required.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are a retired U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret who now serves at the Honor Foundation. That's a pretty impressive opening lead in. I feel like anytime you go with Green Beret, there's always intrigue of what you've been up to. So maybe just take us a second and walk us through what the Honor Foundation is, and then we'll dig into some of your story.
Okay. Well, the Honor Foundation is a transition program specifically designed for special operations. So for those who are not familiar with special operations, you have Special Operations Command, SOCOM. There's a lot of video games and things out there that talk about SOCOM. But under SOCOM, you have Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and all the special operations functions underneath them. So we serve everyone in the special operations community. Here at the campus that I work for in Tennessee, we service the soldiers at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So that's 5th Special Forces Group and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment.
Help us know more for special operations, special forces. Does that span every branch of the military?
So each branch has their own special operations, but special forces, the title, I'm always asked, like, are you a Navy SEAL? I'm like, no, I'm a Special Forces soldier, a Green Beret. A Green Beret is the hat we wear. The Special Forces tab is the insignia that we get when we graduate the course. But Navy has their special operations, which is Navy SEALs. You have the Air Force. They have combat controllers, and then they have special operations aviators, and then Marine have their Marine special operations. So special forces is the word special forces is unique to Army and the Green Beret.
Okay, so your focus is on special forces uniquely within the Army is what the Honor Foundation is.
No. The Honor Foundation covers all branches of special operations. It started with Navy SEALs.
Okay.
And then when our CEO came on, Matt Stevens, he worked with Green Berets and Rangers and Marine Special Operations when he was in Tampa, and he said, why aren't we, looking to take this to all special operations? And then since then, his goal has been to take it to all of DoD, which we launched another program this past year as a pilot, and we went full-time in January of this past year in 2024. It's called Vector Accelerator, which serves all of DoD. It's a self-paced course, but
Tell me what DoD is.
Department of Defense.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, yeah.
I'm still learning, some of
Civilian
the common,
life.
acronyms. That's part of the program, and it sticks with us. And I've learned also that there's just as many acronyms in the civilian world that I've had to become accustomed to.
Gosh, isn't that the truth? So it started with special forces. I think, like you said, there's video games and movies. Everyone's a little bit obsessed with what a Green Beret does. Is there a special type of training that you feel like special forces coming out of the military need to enter civilian life different than perhaps somebody that wasn't in special forces? Is it a different program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've kind of explained it this way. When I enlisted in the military, I was a combat engineer, 12 Bravo, which is explosives and demolition, not special forces. I was in the Army. It took about 90 days to make me a baseline combat engineer that could go to a unit and then be mentored to do my job. To become a special forces soldier, it took me an additional 2 years of assessment selection, detailed training, on a specific job, specific career, You work as a small team. You learn a language. I learned Arabic, and then you
learned Arabic in less than 2 years?
Yeah, it's 6 months of all day 8 to 5, and then at night, training Arabic.
Immersion.
Immersion, it really is. And it's important in special operations because, what you see in the movies and the video games is only like 5% of what we do. Really what we are is, we use relationships and understanding a culture to go into countries and have them help themselves and maintain national security. So, but back to the original question is, so it took that 2.5 years to make us a special operator. And then for our whole career, we're told, quiet professional, don't talk about what you do. Well, now you're going into a world where you have to talk about what you do. You have to be able to express how you're going to provide return on investment to an employer. Or if you're starting a business, you have to be able to, in order to get a loan, you're going to have to be able to tell them, how is this business going to make money? What's the bottom line here?
Got to walk somebody through your resume and
Exactly.
be able to
100%.
articulate what you've done well without bragging on yourself.
Yes,
but
sir.
that's something that's a long ways away from what you've been trained to do.
And one thing that, we kind of take for granted in the military too is I'm so accustomed to walking into a room in my uniform, having my name, the schools I've been to, the unit I'm a part of, the deployments, combat deployment patches. And that really is, a summary of who I am. So at a quick glance, I can tell who you are and what you've done. And now we're going into a world where I walk in like this. It's like, who's this person?
Yeah.
It took some getting used to because we, you'll hear me say we a lot, and we teach our fellows not to do that. But we don't like taking credit for anything that we've done. We like to see as a member of a team and how we've, done things as a team. And it's difficult because you feel like you're bragging. You feel like you're, I felt dirty when I'm talking about me as an individual and accomplishments, but it's really about the people who are left and right who have helped us through this.
I'd love to know a little bit about your story. How did you end up serving in the military? So we were talking 26 years in the military, 16 deployments, right? Mm-hmm. How did you get there?
You sure you want to hear this story? I was born and raised right here in the great state of Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. Manchester is where I call home. My parents and I, we moved to Chattanooga. My dad's a programmer. My mom worked at a bank. And my grandparents still have the farm. My grandmother still lives there today in Middle Tennessee. And I was, looking back, I was able to learn a little bit about the hustle bustle, time management in the city life, and the networks, and in the rural America, I was able to learn, spending time with my grandparents, sense of community and, coming together to help one another because, like hay has to get put up before it rains. Sure. Or, we're making, food train for someone at church that, became ill or is going through something. And, so it was a good mix. Push forward a few years, I was 17 years old. And I asked my dad, I said, I need to tell you something, but you got to promise not to tell my mom. And he said, okay, well, what do you got? I said, well, my girlfriend's pregnant and, I don't know what to do. And he said, okay, well, first, I want you to rethink what you just told me. And how am I not supposed to tell your mother this? So
the famous last words, sure, I won't tell mom. Yeah.
But that just, kind of shows you where my head placement was at that age and subsequent decisions didn't get really any better. I elected to drop out of high school because I wanted to start earning a wage so I could pay for insurance and provide for my son. And, I job hopped for a little bit. I did a little bit of everything. Construction, I was, on a framing crew. I went to a sawmill and was working, pulling, giant logs off of these conveyor belts. And then I just elected to do an apprenticeship with auto body and paint. And after spending, a few months with people who had, literally been in a paint booth their entire life. I'm like, I don't think there's much of a health future for me if I stay in this career. Love the people that do those things, but that is
hard.
It is very difficult. So one summer I was working with my grandfather on the farm, and he was working me. We were putting in fence posts and pulling wire because he was separating his pastures for the cattle. And he asked me, he said, Josh, come over here. I want you to sit down on my truck. He's like, I was reading my Bible this morning. I was like, oh, no, here it comes. Yeah, I'm about to get a lecture from Granddaddy. But, I listened to my grandfather. I had a lot of respect for him. And he said, I know you think I'm a good person. He's like, but I'm not. He's like, I've surrounded myself with people who inspired me to be a better version of me. And he said, in Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, one man does another. He said, I encourage you to join the service, just to, surround yourself with some people who help you become the best version of you that you can be for the son. Next week, I was at the recruiting office. And,
wow.
It took a little time for me to get in, but once I made it through basic and AIT, and I got to my first duty station, and that's where I learned what that other piece of iron was like. Iron sharpen iron is not an easy task, and it came in the form of a career-long mentor. I still stay in touch with him. He was at my retirement. Retired Sergeant Major Joe Fancher, who I met at 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, New York, and so that brought me into the military, and I really learned the difference there of being mentored by default versus being mentored by design. By default is just allowing the people who are around you to affect who you are without any sort of thought or without any sort of design, as my grandfather was mentioning, is like surround myself with people who will inspire me to be better.
That reminds me of a phrase, is that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time around.
Absolutely.
And I think it's amazing, as part of your story, sitting on the back of the truck with your grandfather, and he was giving you some counsel to say, hey, go do this. And the fact that you responded and did so immediately shows that even through a series of searching and tough choices, you remained coachable and teachable. And that's something that I think a lot of people lose in difficulty, is they say, there's nothing for me here. Everything that I've been trying doesn't work. And so to heck with what anybody has to say for me, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
And then, that's a way to really find rock bottom is to go that pathway.
Yeah.
So I think that's really an interesting part of the story, but keep going.
No. So I spent 2 years at Fort Drum, New York, and the lesson I learned there was I would rather mow my yard every day than wake up at 4 o'clock and shovel snow. They get
like a true Tennessean.
Yeah, I'm not. I was like, I've got to get back to the South. No, it was a great. I know I can drive in the snow now, unlike most of the folks here in Tennessee. But it was great for me to separate myself from where I grew up and the people, because I wasn't necessarily hanging around the right crowd. You wouldn't have even wanted me in this room if I would have continued on that path. But I deployed to Bosnia. That was my first deployment in 1998, and during that deployment, I re-enlisted to come back to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. En route, I went to Ranger School, and I really have been at Fort Campbell pretty much ever since. So I served in the 101st. So I've served in 2 of the 3 units at Fort Campbell. If you got the major unit, tenant units, you have the 101st Airborne Division, 5th Special Force Group, and 160th. So I was a pre-ranger instructor, used that as an opportunity to train up to go to Special Forces selection. I was always trying to find, what's next, where are the next group of 5 that I want to surround myself with. And I had done some training with Special Forces, they at a range at Fort Campbell one time, and I was like, man, I want to be a part of these folks. So I actually went to Special Forces assessment 3 times. First 2 times I'd injured myself, and then and I was heartbroken because I made it to the very end the first time, and then I came back. I didn't let myself recover. I came back too early because I wanted to get it done. And the doc, I remember him at the very end. He's like, "Listen, you have no chance of getting selected if you're not here on the last day." He's like, "Who are you in competition with?" Because most of the time I was trying to run ahead of everyone in the pack, and I went off the major road and twisted my ankle pretty bad on some tree falls. It was early in the morning on a ruck march. And he's like, "You're not in competition with anyone. They just want to see that you're consistent and that you try." He's like, "But you'll never get selected if you're not here at the end." So I took that to heart, went back to my unit, trained up, did a proper train up, and went back. And that was my goal, was just to be there on the end and let the cards lie where they may. So I was going to continue to go back until they told me otherwise. Yeah. But I'm grateful that I had opportunity. Went through the Q course at Fort Bragg, the qualification course for Special Forces. I was originally selected as a 18 Bravo, which is a weapons sergeant, and then Arabic, which each Special Forces group have an area of responsibility. So ours is predominantly in the Middle East, and we've been busy for the last 20 plus years. And we have soldiers continue to deploy. But
the Middle East has been busy for the past couple thousand years.
Right?
Years. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're spot on with that, and that's a lot of what folks don't understand. Is like, why haven't things changed in 20 years? It's like they haven't changed in thousands of years. It's going to take a lot.
I feel like what you're saying is such a metaphor for life. Our pastor always says, just keep showing up.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to be to the left or the right. You don't know what's coming, but all you can control is to just show up. And I love how you said that because, we have tweens at home, and I feel like there's so much comparison culture right now. Like you said, you wanted to run ahead, right? And you twist your ankle. And I think that's applicable even to my tween daughters. It's like they're looking to their left and right and trying to see how they can be the biggest and the boldest. And you want to shine in the giftings you've been given, but half the battle is just surviving to the end.
Yeah,
maybe more than half.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I just recently read a book because I have a son and a daughter, and my wife. They're both out of the house. My daughter works at Deer Run here in Leapers Fork, and then my son works at St. Thomas West as a nurse. But it was called The Anxious Generation. And it's talking about how, comparing yourself to people around you. And really that's, what I was doing. And when I was going through assessment selection was comparing myself and where I lie compared to the people around me versus controlling what I could control, which is who I am and what I'm doing and just staying on the path and making it to the very end. So it really was unique. And then after the course, I went to 5th Special Forces Group here at Fort Campbell, had several deployments, and I elected to assess for warrant officer, which I became a warrant officer, which you're the assistant detachment commander in your first position, and really you're an advisor to the commander at all levels, and retired as a chief warrant officer for. So it's kind of like a COO would be like an advisor to the CEO on the operations side. You're the continuity. You've been in the organization for a while. As commanders rotate out, you just keep the ship moving forward. And I really enjoyed that aspect. Yeah.
So how did you end up, I feel like after being in service for so long, it's got to be really intimidating to come out and try to figure out, okay, what's next? You have a couple of kids, they might be grown, but you still have kids and a life that you want to lead, and you're still young and healthy. How did you end up where you are today?
Well, it was purely a God thing in my opinion. At 18 years, I had told my command chief warrant officer at 5th Special Forces Group that I wanted to retire, and he brought me in. And I'd recently had a friend who had retired and was doing contract work where they go back overseas, and he was killed while he was on terminal leave. And I knew I didn't want that route. I'm like, if I'm going to continue to go overseas and be away from my family. I might as well stay in the Army where I have medevac, I have Air Force, all the the assets that we bring to the table. And he said, I'd come up with a plan. So the only plan that I could come up with, and speaking with my wife, is like, we can control our budget. So we were Dave Ramsey and Dave Ramsey. Like, our mission was to understand, like, I saw all my friends retire. They go buy a new truck, buy a new boat, buy all this stuff. And then it's like, well, now you got to afford that. So we were like, we're going to pay everything off that we can so that we know that we can live comfortably with our retirement and whatever work I could pick up. And my wife is a dental hygienist. She works as well. So that was the plan. And I hit 26 years. I was actually going to stay till 30. I was looking to go. My body told me it was time. I needed a total hip replacement. And when I made that, that decision, the Army provides you a 6-month period or 4 to 6 month period where you can do an internship paid for by the military. You still receive your paycheck with a company, and I wasn't really going to do anything with it, but I ran into a gentleman who was a former commander of mine, Scott Brower, who is really behind the scenes of everything that's veteran and spouse initiatives in the state of Tennessee. I'm pretty sure he currently is director for the Bass Scholars Program at Vanderbilt. But the governor made him the COVID czar. I don't remember what the official title was, but during COVID, him and his sergeant major, Mario Vigil, helped with the planning and the crisis management during COVID. And the governor saw the value in the veterans and how they were problem solving and, oh, we're running out of bed space. Well, there's a gymnasium. There's your bed space. So, just being able to adapt and problem solve. So the state started working this initiative. I came down to a couple of meetings that I was invited to just to kind of hear. And the opportunity came up to do my internship with the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. Ralph Schultz, current CEO, is also the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army. So he works recruiting and, spouse and veteran initiatives here in Middle Tennessee. So I said, sure, why not? I don't plan on working. I'm going to hunt and fish my life away, so let me do this. And, started helping with the chamber, with a community that I've been a part of for 20 plus years at Fort Campbell, 101st, 5th Group, and 160th. And then you had an existing network called the Nashville Area Chamber where all these businesses, invest to be a part of. And I'm like, well, all I got to do is connect the dots. And we started doing that through Nashville business leader visits to Fort Campbell. And what we would do is take them up there. We lure them in with a helicopter ride and go into
That'll
the
get
range.
them every time.
Oh, yeah.
All it takes is a helicopter ride. You can get anywhere you want.
Yep. And then we end the day at the Spouses Career Center and the Transition Assistance Office, which is, really kind of putting the connective tissue together where it's like, hey, here's opportunities. There's people who are looking to work. And we have a workforce deficit here in Middle Tennessee, about, 50,000, at any given time. And if you employed everyone who is unemployed, you still have about a 35,000 deficit. So it's, there's jobs available. We ran just a survey through the transition office to kind of see where and why soldiers were leaving the state. The main reason was connection and job availability. Well, it's like, there's jobs available. Why are they leaving? So there was a communication gap. And we've noticed, with all the growth here in Middle Tennessee, you have businesses coming in from out of town who aren't familiar with the area. So if you mention Fort Campbell, Kentucky, it might as well be 8 hours away when it's actually only a 45-minute drive. And a lot of those folks would commute. So, closed that gap. And as I was working with Honor Foundation, I had several mentors, back to coachability, several mentors tell me that I should go through this program called the Honor Foundation. And at first I was like, I don't need it unless they're, telling me, where some great fishing spots are or how I can apply for, elk hunt in Colorado. And, I kept getting people telling me. So I was like, eventually I said, I want to go through this program. And phase 1, I swore that they had sprinkled some voodoo magic on me, because it's our assessment phase where we focus on who that individual is. And that's what I think our program does differently and better than anyone else. We're not a job placement. We help them attain the skills to find what's next for them.
So can anybody who is in Special Forces go to the Honor Foundation?
Yes.
Do you have to apply? How does one even begin?
So go to honor.org, and there's an application process, very simple. We ask some questions. It's a little, I would say, 2 to 3 paragraph questions that we want to get, but it's having them put some skin in the game, because it is free. It's a nonprofit. So we want, if it was just sign up by putting your email address, we'd have a lot of people sign up and then not attend. So we want to know that they have some skin in the game at first. So they have to submit a resume, and then they just like Special Forces, they do an assessment process. I have 2 coworkers, teammates of mine, Shane Minnick, who I've known forever, and Jackie Edwards, who they handle really the onboarding and the program aspect. So they do an interview with them, make sure that this is the right program for them, and they're willing to dedicate the time, because it is a 3-month-long course. We meet 2 nights a week, currently meeting at our space is provided by Clarksville Regional Airport. Wonderful space right outside of Fort Campbell. And it's just amazing.
Do they do anything for the spouses too, or is it really focused on the special?
No, yeah, and that's one thing that I think is unique too. In this last year, and we're really starting to ramp it up, it's called Transition as a Team Sport, because it really is. This is the first time in these soldiers' careers where they've actually had ample decisions to make, and they're not making them as a team. Typically you're making all your decisions as a team. I never planned anything in my military career that was successful by myself. I always had people around me to provide input, subject matter experts. Well, this is the one time that we have our spouses. So they work through a lot of the same things that we do by themselves in phase 1, and it's strengths assessment. So we see what their strengths are, the Gallup Strengths Poll, and then we do preferences with them. And then we bring them together and show, like, here's where your strengths are, here's where your spouse has strengths that you do not, and here's where there's overlap, where there might be friction. And then here are the preferences. Spouse wants you to be around. You want to continue to travel.
You want to go hunt every weekend. It's a little bit different. Yeah.
So really it brings them together and helps make decisions together. But even though for single soldiers, the thing that about our cohort, even the online and our in-person campuses, or our virtual and in-person campuses, is you're transitioning together with 30 or 40 other people, right? So you have that team. The first thing I enjoy, the first thing we do in class is called Pains and Gains, where they get on Menti. It's a little survey tool, and it populates on our big screen, and we go through, like, what are your pains, what are your gains? And it's great to hear, struggles, and then hear someone else who just went through that recently that can tell them how to solve that problem, whether it's, turning in their equipment. Like, I don't know where I can get this piece of equipment I lost. Well, here it is. Or a gain, like we introduced them to what's called cups of coffee, which is the whole purpose of our program is to help them make an informed decision on what's next. And we use what we call cups of coffee.
50 cups of coffee, right?
50 cups of coffee. There you go. But it doesn't stop at 50. That's just the
I was going to say, do you cut them off, like, at that point? Are they so caffeine addicted that you cannot have 51? That's the law? Okay.
Yeah. But, so the assessments that we do, the Gallup strengths, and then we do one that's called Career Leader, which takes their strengths, motivators, and aligns them with career fields. So we tell them anything 80% match or above, that's where you start with your cups of coffee. So if you're, 4 out of my top 5 are in relationships. So business development, a lot of those kind of were in line with my career leader matches. So that's where I would start having cups of coffee.
And who are you having cups of coffee with?
Just people that we connect them with, volunteers in our community. And, we encourage them to, we help them, but we're a teach a man to fish. We don't we don't want to fish for them all the time. So we'll, if they hit a dead end, we'll encourage them. They also have a coach who they work with outside of the faculty, the coaches who meets with them the most. They meet once a week, 1 to 2 hours a week. And these are, former CEOs and business leaders who have a little bit more time on their hand to invest in them. And they're making introductions for them as well.
That's so cool.
It's interesting in our transportation world, hiring individuals out of the military were some of the very best people that we employed, doing package delivery, doing work that required logistics and repetition, finding a pattern to go and execute. And in many cases, the individuals preferred being alone, right? They're in the truck. It's quiet. There's not a lot of people to interact and talk with. And so what are some of the things, if you had to point at some patterns of transitions that tend to be more successful, is there anything that you can see that is more common?
Well, no.
Okay.
And really because we all have, and I say it's like asking, I'm a Tennessean, so I'm a big Vols fan. So where do you see folks from the University of Tennessee going most likely? Or they're all individuals. They all have different strengths. They all have different passions. But that's where what we want them to do is expose themselves to as many things that, a lot of the titles they'll see on that career leader report, they're not familiar with. We have people in logistics. We have people in healthcare. We have people, all over the community. And we really, focus on making an informed decision. We have classes, company research where we tell them, if it's a publicly traded company, there's a lot of information here that you can find. You can look at their shareholder report, see where they're going, see what they're doing. We tell them to look at their website, see what they're involved with philanthropically, because there may be a connection. If, with Tractor Supply, I may be, passionate about, what they're involved with philanthropically, and I want to get involved with that. Or if it's HCA or, any of the, the companies that are around, or if it's starting my own business. We see a lot of entrepreneurs. When you said logistics, it made me smile because I didn't realize that was a strength. But, I had to plan, equipment leaving the United States, traveling through 2 or 3 different companies or countries. I had to understand, what information was needed to, get it through customs at each of these countries, and then, arrive at a destination. And our entire mission succeeded or failed unless we had that equipment.
Yeah.
So, you don't think about those things, but those are things that, and it's really not in the job title or the things that make movies or books, but those are some, skills that we have that are amazing. But, business development, project management, we just, at the end of our cohort, we do what we call Trek. It's business visits. We go spend about an hour and a half, and we take them to every sector, industry that you could think of, just to expose them to the different, because business development in finance is different than in retail or in, government contracting. So we want to expose them to different things and really just open their minds. I have a picture I'd love to share with you, but it's the last night is called transition night. So if this whole thing is a planning process, we have them brief their plan because, there's something about putting something down on paper and then briefing it to a group of people that, kind of embeds it into your brain. But the second thing we ask them is to put a picture that has meaning for their next chapter in life. And one of our alumni from the spring cohort this year, when it popped up on the screen, I almost brought a tear to my eye, but I was like, yes. He was standing there and he's like, as I was leaving the Army or thought about leaving the military, I thought that my skills, could only translate into very few things. But now I feel like this individual, and it was a silhouette staring up at the stars. He's like, I feel like this individual staring at the stars who has ample opportunities and can go in any direction I want. And Shane, our program director, he says one of the things that excites him the most is when he hears our soldiers or our alumni turn down opportunities, because it didn't match their preferences. It didn't match their strengths, and it didn't match the culture that they want to be a part of. That really is. I mean, I wish I would have been through this program prior to my kids going to college, because I would have taken them through this on my own, because it's all about helping them make an informed decision. And, as we spoke about earlier, it's, you look on LinkedIn, and I use it as a motivating tool for them, because in the military we have, if you want to do something, you have to go to, if you want to be a Ranger, you got to go to Ranger school to be a Ranger. If you want to be Special Forces, you have to go to Special Forces training to become Special Forces. In the civilian world, if I can articulate how my skills and strengths will provide return on investment to an employer, I have a good opportunity of getting that job. And LinkedIn is a perfect diagram of that. You'll see people who went to college for social study or, whatever, history, and then now they're the CEO of a company. It's like, what do the two of these have to do? What did you go to school for?
Economics and psychology.
So, but you were able to identify your strengths, see where you could put them in entrepreneurship, and you followed your passions, and now you're successful. So
I can kind of relate to that. I've never served in the military, but I was the Spence always sees me. I was like the bookish one in this relationship. Spence couldn't get out of school fast enough. He works every day to not have to go back to school.
One of my biggest motivating factors to be successful is so I don't have to go back to school.
Ever.
Yeah.
I would live at school because I like the sticker of completion. I want the star sticker that I did it. I want someone to give me a syllabus. If you give me a syllabus, I will excel at said syllabus, right? But there's something about when I matured and came into adulthood and I finished school, and then I was like, well, I have to get a master's degree because that's the next leader, right? And I do all these things, and then you come out and there's no more gold sticker. Yeah. There's no one giving you your next plan. There's no one telling you how to be successful, how to get an A. You're just trying to figure it out. Yeah. And I feel like that is what you are helping these really special individuals. I'm just one person that liked school that had a hard time in my 20s figuring out what was next. Yeah. These are people that have changed the world.
Yeah. Well, we have, and I will say, you have people like myself who have retired, but we have midterm, that 10-year mark, and then we have, first term, which did 2 to 3 years. And we tell them, these are all the available resources you have. I mean, you worked and you earned a GI Bill or a post 9/11 GI Bill, so you have free college. If you're 23 years old, 24 years old, I would probably go back to college. Let's identify what you want to do and the best pathway to get you there. But if you're a retiree, if you're 45, maybe you don't necessarily need to go back to school to get additional accreditation because you have work experience. And that's where my work at the chamber comes in, is I'm helping companies see, and I love seeing it now, where it used to be bachelor's required. Now it's like bachelor's or equivalent experience or equivalent military experience. And it's really just them acknowledging, okay, hey, there is some value in this. And because every year I was doing some sort of professional education, 2 to 3 months of the year throughout my military career. It's one thing that I've noticed is the military DoD is one place where leadership isn't just we're going to bring someone in to do a discussion once a month. It's a leadership school you go to, and they invested in Private Burch the same way that they invested in Chief Warrant Officer for Burch, because they don't know if Private Burch is going to become the Sergeant Major of the Army someday. So they have to invest in each of us, the same. So I tell them that just because, we do encourage our fellows, if they want to continue their education, we bring in guest speakers to talk about, opportunities there for post-grad, or, even if it's completing their bachelor's.
As to take you all the way back to the beginning, and you think about Manchester, Tennessee. Manchester has an interesting story in that there are some tough stories in Manchester, and there's also some really good stories in Manchester. If you go back there today, what do you see in Manchester and the path that you took that has resulted in a transformative life experiences? Your kids have gone to college, all sorts of change. What do you see in Manchester as you look back today?
Well, Manchester it's always home to me. We were just there this past weekend. My grandmother turned 90 years old. Unfortunately, my grandfather's not around anymore, but it was always the root of where my life started, and I'm grateful for that experience. And really, Chattanooga, the same way. I'm not as close to Chattanooga per se, because my mom and dad have since moved back. They live in the Bell Buckle area. So like Chattanooga has changed a lot too.
It sure has.
But I guess, it's all built me into who I am today. And I'm grateful for every, back to iron sharpens iron, struggle is a part of gain, you don't, gain muscle mass without hurting, by going to the gym and putting in hard work. The same with life, I learned a lot through overcoming struggles, making stupid decisions, learning from them, that applied later on in my life. And, I really see, like the farm life, I'm a social introvert is what I like to tell people, because I love being around people and helping people. But then there's times where I just need to seclude myself and be in the woods to, clear my mind and, readjust. And, I think that, that's kind of what Manchester represents to me is, that farm, our farm is back off of like about 1.5 mile road, surrounded by woods. At the time when I was growing up, there were no houses around, just my grandparents' farm. And, I really enjoyed that, just peace and calm. And I enjoyed the sense of community, seeing, people help one another. I think that was one of the struggles I have with as being a soldier is not just, I volunteered to sacrifice, so I volunteered to do this, but my family, my kids, even my wife volunteered because she married me, but my kids, they didn't volunteer to sacrifice, they were just raised in that environment. And there's a lot of sacrifice that goes on. If you think, 22 years of marriage, been home about 8.5, 9 of those years. So those kids were, without a parent, one of the parents. And then when I came home, it was really kind of transient. So, but coming home and seeing the news and like, it just seems like the whole world's just falling apart all the time. It's like I always said, if I could own a news agency, for every bad story reported, I'd report 3 good ones. Because there's a lot of great that goes on around us, but it's just not captured. And, that's what I saw in Manchester, and that's what I see here in the community. I really see that in Nashville too. For a city, there's a lot of great, even with the Honor Foundation, with the Nashville Chamber, I work closely with Operation Stand Down Tennessee, all the businesses that are participating. It's a collaboration of our community, and we're the volunteer state for a reason. Like we all come together in a time of need, and you see that anytime there's a natural disaster here. Like you see a community come together. Yeah. And I love that. I really do.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch a little bit on we talked about the anxious generation and what we're seeing happen to kids, but there is a lot of struggle and mental health issues that can happen for veterans as just a nature of the work that they have been through and what they have sacrificed and walked through in their families. Can you talk a little bit about that as these soldiers are coming out? What do businesses need to know about what they've experienced and what they're going through so that they can support them as employees to be the best that they can be?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with, one of the things that I've noticed is, and I really feel like with the Honor Foundation, we're saving lives. Because I recently went to, there's an organization called Face the Fight. A lot of different folks come together to, prevent veteran suicide. And I really didn't feel like I had a seat at the table, but I was invited. And I was like, I'm not saying anything because, we're not, chartered as suicide prevention. But as I started to hear the things that were being said in the room, I noticed, a lot of the organizations out there at the point of ideation, like I want to commit suicide. where I feel that we are on the front end in helping them plan what's next. Help them, give them a sense of community to find what's next. Help them with the confidence that enabled them to do something that, 99.9% of our population elect not to do. So we're trying to reinstill that confidence so that they can go out and find fulfillment in their second chapter. Understand how to translate their skills. Understand that there's a community there of alumni, and the Honor Foundation really starts after the Honor Foundation because we continue to serve them throughout for life. So, but from a business standpoint, I will say, it's just, the veteran resource groups, and I recently worked with the state. The state of Tennessee just launched the Veteran Ready Business Recognition Program, which it's to recognize businesses that are doing it right, but it's also a how-to book for businesses that are interested. And that would be a good resource to start. But really just developing that sense of community, providing them an opportunity and a chance, just because you don't understand exactly what they did and how it can apply, give them the opportunity. If you have other veterans within the organization, pair them up as a we, in the Army, we use the term battle buddy, as a veteran mentor that can help them along the path. It's all about mentorship and just helping other people. But, and understanding the resources that are out there. That's one of the things that I love about what we're doing with Honor Foundation, is we're very proactive. We go to the units and ensure that they understand that our resources available to them. We're briefing them constantly, at least every quarter. Because there's so many organizations out there doing great things, but it's almost an overload of information. Google is, you Google veteran resources, it's just hundreds of them, but it's like, what's the right one? And we want to help them make that decision.
Mm-hmm. It's giving that compelling future that retirement really is not all that it's cracked up to be.
Oh.
And I think there's a lot of people that are very fortunate that you did not go out and just hunt elk and fish your days away, because the compelling future that you're living and creating for other people is one that I think is a important guidebook. And that's a key aspect of what you said there, is that there's a lot of businesses that don't have any military presence inside of them. They're patriotic, love the country. Their heart hurts for the stories, but it's like, how do we even begin to be a part of this besides just giving money to organizations that are doing something?
Well, I thank you for that tee up. So our program, is 100% on volunteers. We have opportunities. We do mock interviews. Like this last cohort, for example, we had over 150 volunteers, probably 175 volunteers from 85 different companies, and they'll come in, do mock interviews. We have them come in as faculty. We have coaches. So there's opportunities to get involved. And what I've noticed is, even like with our business visits, is it comes out as like just a patriotic, I want to help a veteran, go help a soldier learn how to interview. And then they leave that interview with, I need to back my truck up and hire as many of these folks as I can.
Yeah.
So we're educating on both sides. The more you sit down, and that's the same with every part of life too. The more I sit down and talk to someone and understand who they are, where they come from, what their experiences are, then I better can relate to them. And I think that's the problem is, one of the good things is we have an all volunteer Army, and we have a ample amount of soldiers who are willing to, serve our country. But when we had the draft, you had a lot more people who were serving shorter amounts of time and then going into the civilian sector. Well, they understood the value. So now you have fewer and fewer amount of the population. So less people understand what you actually do in the military. I mean, the same thing I thought of probably was like, there's a guy that carries a gun, there's somebody that flies a helicopter, and then there's people in tanks. You don't think of it. But Fort Campbell is a city within a city.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like Vanderbilt. We have our own hospitals, we have our own, child care facilities, our own schools, everything.
It's like everything, every
Department
role.
of Public Works, the whole 9 yards. So, and we have a soldier who is essentially a mayor, which is the garrison commander. You have a division commander. So you have all these different, things that correlate to, normal life. And I think that gets exposed once you put people in a room together and they start talking.
You just need to be the translator, which you did with Arabic, but it seems like that's your job, is now you're the translator of all of the acronyms, what these job titles, like even just saying he's the mayor, helping civilians understand what that job title means, and helps the people that had that job title translate it for the rest of us.
And that's what those business leader visits through the Nashville Chamber help us with, is they get to see it. Not only are you hearing it, but you're seeing it. And then, I'm lucky because that's where I say this is a God thing, is I'm on both ends of the spectrum. I'm helping businesses, connect and better understand the value, and I'm helping soldiers articulate themselves and better understand their value, so they're able to meet in the middle. And it really is amazing. I'm truly honored, no pun intended. I'm truly honored to be a part of the Honor Foundation and the Chamber. I actually am the Vice President for Special Forces Association, Chapter 38 as well. So I went from not having any jobs to 3 jobs. It's volunteer for the Special Forces Association, but I was going 150 miles an hour, and to think that I was just going to hit the brakes and my family, my wife would want to stay with me. I needed to be busy. After about 2 weeks of great ideas, she's like, you need to find something to do.
Well, and this is not pandering. Sitting here across from you, there's true joy that lights up your face when you talk about your work. And I just think there is this mistake in our culture right now, this idea that taking care of ourselves, self-care, means putting on the brakes completely and disengaging and thinking about what do I need, what me. And there is a place where you do have to soul search and think, but I also believe that God ordered the universe, that when we are outside focused, we heal on the inside. And I think what you're doing at the Honor Foundation about how you can serve, what am I good at, what am I gifted at, and how can I continue to serve my country and my family in civilian life, is a really powerful testament to that ordering that God did of the universe. So I think that's very cool.
It's awesome you say that, because I tell our fellows, and as they become alumni, I say, you served in an all volunteer military. There's something inside you. It's got a serving heart. So I don't care, and purpose is one of the things that we see that our folks align with the most. We say there's 5 things everyone wants in a career: love what you do, love the people you work with, live where you want to live, make good money, work reasonable hours. And love what you do and love the people you work with are usually in the top 2. So that sense of purpose, and that's where we say, like researching a company and finding out what they're involved with philanthropically. So it might not, be, serving your country, but something they do that you can be involved with, encourages you to be a part of that organization. But I don't care if it's, serving on a ministry team at church, a little league soccer team, invest in the community around you, volunteering, Operation Stand Down with, their commissary or whatever the aspect is, something like the Honor Foundation. There's ample opportunities. Every class we have an alumni that comes back in and tells their story, a success story of transition and how the Honor Foundation helped them, because we tell them, trust in the process, because, it gets, they feel kind of weird when we're doing the Simon Sinek Start With Why program and they're telling stories about their life. It's like, why is this important? Well, you're going to have to tell a story to make an impact in an interview. So tell stories. But, our alumni come back in and share some of the successes, and it, you get to see that. And I really do. I'm glad that you see the joy on my face, because I really love what I do.
Biblically, one of the favorite teachings that I have is that you recognize people in the faith by their fruit, right? You can see what is produced. And it is no surprise to me that everyone around you has reacted to your service, serving in their own way. they're serving as a nurse, they're serving, your wife is serving, I mean, serving in every capacity. And that is true fruit that has come out of your service. And you're probably relieved on some level that they're not having to serve in 16 deployments of their own, but you would have supported them in that way too, even if you had. So thank you so much for answering and sharing in that, because I think it lets us be able to connect to your heart in a way that people hearing this will say, that's a group that I want to support. One fun tradition we have on most of our podcasts is we ask each of our guests to bring something that will let them tell a little story or reveal a little bit about themselves. So this has been in the middle of the table. All I can kind of tell is it's a big pile of maps and all sorts of things. So maybe tell us what's in the middle, because I'm just dying to know at this point.
Well, when I was asked to bring something, I had 100 things pop through my head.
And you can pick it up and show it to the camera or anything.
Part of the assessment and selection, one of the main parts is land navigation. And, you can really tell, I didn't understand, I thought it was just about the ability to find a point on a map. But you can really tell a lot about a person during land navigation, because they give you specific rules. You're not allowed to use the roads. So in North Carolina, where this course is taking place, there's a lot of draws, swampy area that you have to walk through, and you're doing this at day and night, and you're putting a lot of miles. But I really enjoyed it, and I don't know what it was, just the peace, tranquility of being out by myself, and having to problem solve without someone there. But they teach you throughout the course, and this is a compass, lensetic compass that you use. I've got a really fine point pencil and a protractor, which you use to identify where you're at, and then the map. And then on the map, there's a legend. You have all sorts of things that you have to use. But I really thought that it's really just a lesson to life in general. Is like, you have to have all the tools, because I could just have the map, and I could, halfway get through where I would like to go if I had the adequate training. But I really couldn't do nothing if I just had, this protractor or a pencil. And then, a compass, unless I knew where I was wanting to go, the compass really doesn't do me any good. And I really think that, with the Honor Foundation and with life in general, it's all about surrounding yourself with people and resources to have all the tools to be able to get where you think you want to go, or where God's leading you. And, that's, I'm a map collector. And funny story, recently, my daughter, her phone was having issues, and she told my wife, like, Mom, I'm going to need you to drive me back to Leapers Fork, because I don't know how to get there. And I'm like, I failed as a father. My daughter does not know how to read a map. She has to rely on, one of these map services. And there were several times where I made her or my son use a map to get us to a location, but they usually fell asleep like halfway into it so I would just take over. But yeah, so I think it's interesting, you look at life as a map, it's like where you've been and where you're going. And, sometimes you may get a little bit off course, but, if you have the proper tools and surround yourself with the right people, you can get where you need to be.
Josh, it's an amazing time. Thank you for being with us today. And I think the message that you give us is one of the importance of community and how much that started your story, and how much you're still living that today. Oh. And I think that is amazing as a Tennessean through and through that has been all over the world to places that none of us would ever recognize.
Or be able to find on a map.
You really have brought it back home and are continuing to serve in a way that makes us really proud. So it's great to give you a little bit of a megaphone today and to talk about what you're doing at the Honor Foundation. So thank you for joining us today.
I appreciate it. And if there's ever folks who are interested in getting involved with the program, volunteering, they can reach out to me. I don't know if, or they can go to honor.org to find out how to get involved. And we'd love to get them involved. because it's really having an impact. Thank you.
Good.
Absolutely. So Josh Burch, the director of people at the Honor Foundation, his gifting is definitely people and a translator. I think you hit on something perfect in the podcast that just like how he had to learn Arabic in 6 months of immersive training as a kid from Manchester, Tennessee, learning Arabic, he's had to learn how to translate from military speak to civilian and from civilian to military speak. And I think that's amazing in the heart of service that was so clear coming off of him.
I really loved hearing his story about growing up on his granddaddy's farm. And, I think when the country as a whole thinks of Tennessee, they think of Nashville, maybe sometimes Memphis and Knoxville and Chattanooga. But there are strengths in the people from east to west, north to south. And I love that he said Manchester's still home. And that was the community that built him, and how those are the stories we're hearing every day from people across the state. And I just find that so beautiful that there is no nook or cranny overlooked, that he is a testament to what this state creates. It's like it's in the water. It's why I wanted to have my kids here. It just creates this grit and this beauty in people, regardless of where you're from, that I think it's really cool.
And I think his story beginning in a really tough moment, that it's a teen pregnancy. He's afraid to tell his mom, so he tells his dad, and ultimately it leads him on a course to having to bang fence posts into the ground and pull wire, which is about the hardest job you're going to do on a farm. And his granddad sits him on the back of the truck and says, you need to get into the service. And what a different life Josh may have lived. I think he told us about that himself.
Yeah.
Had he not been coachable and teachable to say, all right, I'm going to listen to the wisdom of my granddad,
Sure.
who's sitting here telling me himself that I'm not the man that you think I am. I'm just the product of the 5 people that I've spent the most time around.
I think what I really heard from this is something you and I talk about a lot as we evaluate what business we're going to do next, or what we want to do with our family or beyond, right? Is this feeling of not being afraid to do something because it's hard. There could be a lot of reasons to or to not do something, but how hard something is or how much sacrifice you're going to have to make to do it cannot be part of the calculus. You can think about everything else, but refusing to be afraid of doing hard things. And that's what I heard from Josh. That's what I heard from his wife, from his kids, even though they didn't know it. He was even saying, that life was kind of thrust upon them. But the fruit that it's produced is just so powerful when you're not afraid to do hard things.
I think that translates really, really well in his story and the ultimate outcome, that his service leaves a mark every day on not only his fellow veterans, but his family, in that he has sacrificed like what most leaders have to do. The higher you climb that chain, the more that you have to sacrifice. But I think it's also powerful in that he doesn't sit across from a single man or woman on any day where he is saying, well, I didn't do this, but you had to do this. Is that probably in nearly every case, as a Green Beret that served 16 deployments, he is sitting at a even higher level than the person he's having to relate to. And that's what makes him a great leader, is that he's not asking anybody to do something that he hasn't done himself. And that can be sacrifice family, sacrifice opportunity, sacrifice earning potential, all the different things, even sacrifice fishing and hunting elk. He's done it all.
Well, and I thought it was interesting, too, how he talked about how hard it is for these special ops men and women to talk about themselves. It makes them feel icky.
Yeah.
And you could feel that on him. He was so authentic, but the idea of sharing his own story is so raw. And I am so inspired by this idea that it is never about self-promotion. Not 1 ounce of what he's doing, what the Honor Foundation is doing, any of this is about name recognition or them as an individual. It's about helping the greater whole. And I think as you talk about growing in leadership, sometimes people need to know your name so you're effective. Sometimes they don't. But the goal can never be, should never be pride or who I am or what I climb to. It's always about what is my reach to serve the most number of people possible. And I feel like he really embodied that in such an authentic way that is powerful to the people he helps. But gosh, I hope even if people listening to this have no military background and do not feel called to that kind of service, they will see that in his humanity, because that's a bug I hope all of us catch.
Oh, I really love that. That's a great identification in him, that the heart posture of service is what has allowed him to be elevated. It was never about self-promotion. And it's that really delicate line between having to do the things in a civilian business climate to promote and market. But in doing so, he's never lost sight that he's doing it for his fellow soldier, not in the elevation of himself.
Because he'd probably rather be with his map.
Yeah, that's right.
Walking by himself. It's actually sacrifice in itself to be in front when your heart posture is in that place.